enter the public session, please? One by Mrs. Weiss, second by Mr. Tamio. All in favor? 5-0. I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, but afterward, if we could just have a moment of silence to honor one of our community members, Chris Raguso, who is a young man that graduated from Glenn, was killed in Iraq in a helicopter crash, and I was honored to know Chris personally. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was in the military and in the reserve, in the Air Force National Guard. He volunteered during the hurricanes in Texas and in Puerto Rico. He volunteered in many of our schools talking about leadership. He was an FDNY lieutenant. He was a very close friend of my brother-in-law. And most importantly, he was an everyday hero. So he was a wonderful friend, father, son, brother. So let's just honor him with a moment of silence after the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 15th? Motion by Mrs. Weiss, second by Mr. Tamio. All in favor? It's going to be 4-1. Abstention, Mrs. Manuelito. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of March 8th? Mrs. Weiss, second by Mrs. Manuelito. All in favor? 5-0. I'd like to invite the wonderful Ms. Emma Coster up to the podium, please. Give our update.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to wish you all a happy spring, although it doesn't feel much like it. I'm glad to be here tonight sharing all the exciting things happening across the district since the last time I've seen you. The middle school has had a busy few weeks. On March 6th, the 6th graders were lucky enough to take a field trip to the Hall of Science, where they got to learn and experience many new things. The middle school is working to foster good character, positive communication, and relationships as the building took part in Knights of the Round Table, a team building exercise, on March 9th. Dr. Stephen Dewey visited both the middle school and the high school to give a highly informative presentation on the dangers of drugs, alcohol, e-cigarettes, and vaping last Thursday. Lastly, the middle school is looking forward to hosting their musical, High School Musical, this Friday and Saturday, March 23rd and 24th at 7 p.m. We wish all students involved in the show good luck. With what seems like a snowstorm every week, JGHS has had an especially full month as we've tried to schedule everything in around our inclement weather. On March 1st, the famous volleyball-a-thon was held. Students had a fantastic time playing in the gym while raising money for the Sean Erda Memorial Soccer Scholarship, Save the Kid, and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The high school held their musical, The Little Mermaid, the first weekend in March. Additionally, the cast put on a show for the senior citizens of the community, with dinner cooked and catered by student volunteers before the performance began on Wednesday, February 28th. The students crafted a fantastic show. We commend them for all their hard work and dedication that went into making such an entertaining performance. Due to yet another snowstorm, on March 7th, International Night was canceled, but have no fear, it has been rescheduled for April 13th. I think I speak for all of us when I say I really hope that by then we will have sunshine and much warmer temperatures. On March 14th, in response to the nationwide walkouts and demonstrations in memoriam of the Parkland shooting, John Glenn held a safety assembly in which administrators addressed any safety concerns students had, remembered and honored the 17 victims lost, and opened the floor to student-led discussion. Many students expressed that they felt reassured after the assembly and thankful it took place. A survey was posted to take the pulse on student response, and that can be found on the website. As always, we have many individuals to recognize and commend this month. Chemist history teacher, Mr. Harrington, received this month's Noble Knight. The building thanks him for his dedication and passion for his work. Congratulations to the mock trial team led by Ms. Megan Geiser as they continue winning trials and have advanced into the Elite 8. Congratulations to Samantha Pepper, who entered a writing contest at Barnes & Noble and won. The topic was your favorite teacher, and Sam wrote about Mr. Epstein. This is a clear testament to the incredible impact our faculty leaves on the student body. Congratulations to our Northwell Medical Marvels team for winning second place on their 14-page proposal on how to deal with the present opioid crisis. This paper was judged by researchers, MDs, and experts in the field. The 6 students of this team competed against 30 schools from Nassau and Suffolk. In addition, they received $1,000 as a group for their win. Being a former member of the Medical Marvels team myself, I understand the tremendous amount of time and effort that goes into this project. We commend all of the participants for their incredible accomplishment. Spring sports began March 5th, kicking off the final season of the year. As spring sports began, we also looked back to recognize the efforts and achievements of our winter sports with Winter Athletic Awards Night on March 6th. Please join the Elwood Athletic Department in congratulating Alice Chiodo for being chosen as a News 12 2017-2018 Scholar Athlete. This is a great all-around achievement based on Alice's academic, athletic, and leadership abilities. We would also like to recognize the kickline team who traveled to Florida to compete in nationals. Congratulations to all these athletes. We thank you for the hard work you put in on and off the field and the pride you bring Elwood. We look forward to cheering on all the triumphs of our spring sports teams to come. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope everyone enjoys a restful spring break filled with family, friends, and maybe, just maybe, temperatures somewhere in the 60s.
Thank you as always, Ms. Coster. And I'll give it to you, Dr. Coster.
I'm never nearly as entertaining and informative as Emma, but I'll do my best. Obviously, the snow has been very disruptive to our last few weeks, so it's hard to give an update without mentioning some of that. But I would really be remiss if I did not give a heartfelt thanks to our custodial and maintenance crew for their overwhelming response to all of the storms that we've had, enabling our buildings to stay open and functioning safely for our students. The work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we can come and go safely with all of these challenges is just simply amazing. And I do need to state for the record that our buildings were ready to go for student arrival this morning. Had we been able to negotiate that 2-hour delay, it was not the buildings that had kept us from opening. Unfortunately, some of our local roads just were not passable for buses, and we did not want to jeopardize the safety of students or the staff that has to travel long distances to come. But I got lots of pictures to show you that things were ready to rock and roll at each of our campuses. I will have the board and community know the custodians worked round the clock through the night without break to make that happen. They worked from some of their shifts were from early in the evening until early in the morning, 12 hours, 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. To get our buildings ready. And you know, had we had the crystal ball that indicated that the forecast would be completely incorrect and the snow would continue through 8 a.m., we might have sent them home thinking that we would be closed. But not having that accurate information, they worked through the night, and I couldn't be more thankful. As a matter of fact, we'll be hosting a pizza luncheon for them tomorrow to say thank you to the staff. Since our last meeting, when the board authorized the administration to take action on certain security evaluations and enhancements, we've been very, very busy. The community has noticed some additional security guards added to our greeter stations, which we think is excellent. We have, as directed by the board, worked with our architects and engineers to come up with a price quote for the vestibule areas of each of our buildings, what it might be to add some additional layers of security and protection there. And perhaps most importantly, as authorized by the board, we began our complete audit of all security protocols, practices, and facilities with covert investigations. The day after the board meeting, they requested a phenomenal amount of our materials to begin reviewing. As recently as yesterday, they met with members of our administration to talk about a lot of the questions that they need to do as part of their audit. And we anticipate having a completed audit to present to the board's safety committee, chaired by Mr. Tomio and Mrs. Marcus, on April the 18th. In addition, we've had some very skilled members of our community who have backgrounds in law enforcement volunteer to help serve on that committee to help receive and evaluate the report. So we are really pleased with how quickly they are working. They understand the urgency of the work we are doing and have really responded well. Representatives from Covert, Don Flint, who was their director, met with our entire leadership team on Monday afternoon to give them a sense of everything that they would be required to do as part of the audit, and he was really received very, very well. We will continue our focus on safety and security by hosting a community forum for all parents. Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, John Glenn High School Auditorium. We are hosting a representative of New York's finest, Detective Tom Grimes. It will be with us on Tuesday, going over some very important information as it relates to internet and social media safety for parents. He'll be doing presentations at the high school for all of our students during the day, and then we'll return at 7 p.m. to present to our parents. We highly encourage parents to attend. It gives a tremendous amount of information. I've seen it present before, and just eye-opening experiences that give parents better insight to what their children might be involved in without their knowledge, and things to look for. We will make a similar automated call on Monday with a reminder, and much like we did for the Dr. Dewey Forum, we will be offering students community service hours if their parents like to attend. Dr. Dewey's forum was very well attended, and I hope that Detective Grimes is as well.
Can I ask a question? Will children, I should say, allowed to come, and what is the age range?
Children are more than welcome to attend. I don't think there's any limit. I think Detective Grimes, having worked with him before, does a good job scanning the audience and knowing what should and shouldn't be said. He will be presenting to our high school students during the day, but I would, as a parent, feel more than comfortable bringing middle school age children to the presentation as well.
And what about boy age children?
I don't think that. I think it would be very appropriate for our older students as well.
So when we do our call, I call them
Good,
call
everyone.
and post, we can encourage, because I think there are a lot of issues.
We can't go a day within our district without a question or concern regarding a social media post, group text message, or something the like being brought to the attention of a teacher or administrator. Some of it has to do just with bad decisions. We have some great kids who make poor decisions, and some of it has to do with the lack of supervision in those realms. So part of what we're looking to address with the students is having them be more responsible for their own behavior, and with the parents, it's more of what they can do to help supervise those areas.
Because as they get younger and younger, that they start to use social media, do we have any intention of maybe having these kind of presentations go to younger groups, or?
I think it's part of the curriculum, to be honest with you, Mrs. Weiss, to touch upon internet safety, and I know that's covered within lessons that take place with our media specialists in the library. I think it takes place within the classrooms, and I think it's certainly part of the health curriculum. So I would agree that early intervention is a primary deterrent to some of the behaviors that take place when they get older. But yes, it'll be open to all parents. The flyer went home to all parents earlier this week or last week as a save the date, and we will do an automated call to remind everyone that it's Tuesday night. But we are looking forward to New York's finest being with us. This Saturday, there is a rally being held at SUNY Farmingdale. It's being hosted by Senators Swazi and King, who will be hosting a group of student activists who put this together on the issues of trying to prevent violence within school environments. Obviously, this is a topic near and dear to everyone within our district, and certainly our leadership here. I have been asked to speak and be part of a panel discussion representing the Suffolk County Superintendents Association, so I have some prepared remarks to share, and I will make sure that the community is fully aware that actually we sent home the reminder with the notification earlier this week, so I hope to see some Elwood residents represented at that forum. It is competing with some other forums and rallies being held on the same day, some in Washington, some in Manhattan, and one right here at Heckscher Park. So there is some competing forces on the same topic, but for me, the topic's important enough that I hope they're all very well attended. So perhaps I will see you there. And that is it for my update this evening.
Okay, so we are up to first resident remarks. The board encourages all residents to attend its meetings, and the section of the agenda affords them the opportunity to speak. Persons wishing to speak should identify themselves and any organization they represent at the meeting. Comments should be kept as brief as possible, may not exceed 3 minutes. Public discussion of matters regarding staff, students, or others at which their reputations, privacy, or right to due process could in some way be violated is prohibited. Anyone? Resident remarks.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Kathleen Coster.
For all eternity.
I'm so happy to hear about all the physical plans that are being made to keep our buildings safe. I've always felt that our district was safe to begin with, but it's good to see that extra precaution is being taken. Unfortunately, we do know that these violent issues tend to stem from students from their own district. So my question to you is, are we looking at a long-term answer to help our students in conflict resolution, building self-esteem, a lot of the topics that can be delivered during health? I know our students presently receive health for a short period in middle school and a short period in high school. There are programs out there that are K-12 because these are topics that need to be repeated. Is there conversation or discussion and hopefully money or funding that can be gone after to have something like that brought into the district?
The answer to your question is an emphatic yes. We have another number of programs that we brought to the forefront of our thinking and consciousness long before the tragedy in Parkland. When you look at the PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Systems, that was implemented, that is directly about conflict resolution, rewarding positive behavior, making expectations clear, talking about kindness, talking about inclusivity, talking about acceptance. That is that program. At the middle school level, our Nights of Good and those Nights of the Round Table activities were all centered on those same topics and focus. At the high school level, you're very familiar with some of the programs we have in place, and we seek to continue to grow and nurture, whether it be the Natural Helpers or the Freshman Buddies program. They're all aimed at making sure we're preaching an environment of inclusivity, acceptance, collaboration between students, and making sure they all feel that they have a place in the school system. To further answer your question, I think that another aspect is enhancing our mental health support team. And I think when we go through the budget presentation tonight, you'll see that there are 2 major enhancements being recommended to the board in the form of an additional guidance counselor for John Glenn High School and additional school psychologists that would work on a K-12 basis. So we're looking to do both program enhancement and staffing enhancement to make sure we're addressing all matters of student health and safety.
But I guess my question is more curriculum-based, something that students on a weekly basis could in fact have strategies, have information here throughout their school years on some kind of, maybe through the library media specialist or some instructor that is dedicated, and it's a spiral type of curriculum where they would be hearing the same kinds of things. These organizations are wonderful, but students have to seek them out. And I do believe that our students need to learn how to not be angry, when you are angry, what to do. And by the time they're seeking out that natural helper, we need to be giving them the tools so they don't need the natural helper, or that they don't need to be going to another guidance counselor or another mental health. So my concern is that there are things that we could be doing, and teachers do it, they read books, they have events, they have celebrations, but something on a consistent basis, K-12, so that our children could have substantial information to fall upon.
I'm sure Mrs. Hull could further answer the question, but a lot of what you're describing is pillars of the PBIS program. So I think that is our major focus to address many of the concerns that you're raising. Mrs. Hull, is there anything you want
And
to
that's
add?
embedded in the classroom? Oh.
I would just like to add that. Thank you. I would just like to add
Nope.
that.
I just like to have my microphone, it's not working. For the record.
You want this?
So this year, the theme of our school year with all of our staff members is teaching the whole child. And as part of that, we are looking at social emotional learning programs that become embedded in regular instruction. All of that work begins with the education of the faculty, and this year we're looking at the theme of mindfulness. We're actually running an after-school class that starts mid-April, and I'm pleased to say that the class is full with a waiting list of faculty and teaching assistants who are interested in getting a foundation, as then our team proceeds with picking a formal program to bring forward for proposal. So we are looking to embed a formal social emotional learning program.
Excellent.
We also have Sanford Harmony, and that's something we introduced this year. And that's a social emotional learning curriculum. Prior to that, the district was using Second Step, but they weren't using it in every classroom. So this is the first year that we've had Sanford Harmony in at the K-5 level, and you'll be hearing more about that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Scott.
Hi, I have 2.5 issues I would like to present tonight. My first one is a tremendous thank you to Dr. Sapienza, and what a welcome, because I told her tonight I was crying when I read the proposal the other night on the slides. When I thought, I was like, it's really everything.
The board has not yet accepted that proposal.
Oh, that's why I'm here to say, as a mother of an 8th grader and a 6th grader and a 4th grader, if my boys can have that proposal for their middle school, I will be so happy and grateful. I hope you do approve that proposal. I hope it is part of the budget. Is it part of the 2.5, right? It's part of the
It's
median?
actually budget neutral.
Budget?
We'll talk about that.
Okay, so I just want to say, I love it. Everything that has been brought up to Dr. Sapienza at a PTA meeting, to Mrs. Hull at curriculum conversations, this entire year, like every criticism of this building that has been brought to their attention is addressed in this proposal. I looked. I'm like, wait, so-and-so said this. Yeah, it's fixed there. You know, it's really great, and I do hope you accept it and our kids get to benefit from it. My other issue is also the issue of several parents for the last couple of years. The sun exposure in the back playground at Boyd. Mrs. Mamalito, Mr. Tomio have been helping us in the past couple months to figure this out with Ms. Laughlin, who knows the history about this. It's a health and safety concern. It did not get put into the bond, and I think because of circumstances it just got lost in the shuffle. Boyd PTA, we tried to do this a couple years ago. We're back trying to do this again with the help of some board members. I would like to just let you all know publicly, you all know we were trying to figure out why is it so hot back there? Why did my 6th grader for 3 years there hide in one of those tubes? He doesn't like sunscreen, so he had to hide in the tubes in the little playground because it was so hot and he was burning. And that he's not alone. So we're hoping and looking for some kind of shade structure for the back.
Can I give you an answer to that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we actually received a proposal of a specific system to research.
We gave it to you.
Yeah, I know. So we have vetted that system with our architects and with our insurance provider. We are waiting for a report of whether or not it is something that meets with state requirements. In order for it to meet with state requirements, it has to be able to withstand a certain amount of snow that can land on it without it collapsing, and a certain wind speed should a hurricane whip through our area. It makes it the necessity of the strength of the structure is really at a very high level because of the catastrophic effects it would have if it flew off the ground or landed on the child. So NYSER, our insurance provider, our architects, and state ed look very, very carefully at these types of structures before we're allowed to erect them. I can also tell you that we have priced it out. And a unit that costs $40,000 also has a $40,000 installation fee. So it is a significant purchase. But with the game time structure that's been submitted, it is currently being vetted through the necessary channels of whether or not we can green light or red light it.
Thank you. Yes, there's a group of us that wanted me to bring it up tonight to thank Mrs. Mamalito, Mr. Tomio for helping us
Well, I
start
will
this
thank
process
Mr.
again.
McDonald, who
Sure.
took the information
Yeah.
and made sure that it was researched very carefully. I will also thank Mrs. Mamalito and Ms. Tomio for making sure I was aware of it, which I had not been.
Okay.
So I would ask in the future if the PTA has a question to please bring it to the administration, but that's besides the point. But once I had it, we were able to easily find out what needed to be done in order to approve it.
Great. My last issue is the same back playground of Boyd, as we're talking about security and adding security guards. Just to bring it up publicly, you all know how open that back playground is. As one security guard will be on duty in the back during recess, the other one's in the front, which is great. But my concern, you know where I'm going, is like, what is he going to do if someone is there in the back playground? I've talked to a lot of staff, and it's very open and vulnerable. I guess here is also too. Right. You know.
Security guards have been trained to approach anyone who doesn't belong on campus and escort them off campus and dial 911 if necessary. The first thing that security guards do if they feel there is a threat present is lock the children in the building. One of the other security enhancements to the back area of Boyd specifically is that we have introduced the swipe card readers in the entrances, so faculty and staff members who wear their, I'm not wearing my ID, it's a snow day, can use their ID tags to get in and out of the building, so we will not come across any unlocked or propped doors in the back of the building.
And are you discussing amongst yourselves arming the guards?
We had a conversation with, well, two things. Covert Securities will be providing all types of recommendations involving what they feel is needed to enhance our program. I don't imagine their report will include arming guards. Most law enforcement officers, both current and former, are opposed to arming school personnel. The chief of the Suffolk County Police Department met with all superintendents last week and said he was very strongly opposed to that program. However, what we are heavily in favor of is enhancing the school resource officer program, which would be having active duty current Suffolk County police officers on campus in uniform, with weapons obviously, as part of their regular patrol. Nassau County made an announcement just earlier this week that there would be police officers in Nassau assigned to every school. I would anticipate Suffolk will follow closely by.
And who's going to pay for those police
Funding
officers?
is the concern that keeps coming forward. I will share with you that the governor has made it a priority to enhance police presence on campuses, and it may come in the form of either Suffolk County officers or New York State troopers. But as you hear the state budget being finalized, pay attention to enhancements that are given to the police department for school security, because I think there'll be a lot of discussion of that. And there has also been a suggestion brought forward in Suffolk County by the Suffolk County Council of School Superintendents, who says that perhaps districts can fund a portion of that program, because we would reallocate money that we're already spending on security personnel towards the school resource officer program. So that idea might gain some traction because it's been discussed in several venues, and I know the county executive is listening very carefully to that conversation. So I think you'll learn more in the coming days, weeks, months. But what we are strongly advocating for is a greater presence of school resource officers.
That's great. And I will see you Saturday. I was already planning to go to Farmingdale.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Say hello when you... Can I respond to one other thing Mrs. Bell shared? Some comments were made about the proposal for the middle school, and I just want to echo Mrs. Bell's sentiments about our new middle school principal. When Dr. Sapienza was hired and we went over what we felt the priorities were for Elwood Middle School, we identified 3 key factors, and we revisited them just recently. We talked about building and nurturing relationships. We talked about focusing on the adolescent learner and the very special needs and interests of the adolescent learner. And we talked about creating opportunities for both enrichment, remediation, and student choice into the middle school day. And I have to say that the early returns on those 3 priorities are extremely strong. And I commend Dr. Sapienza on her efforts to this point and look forward to continuing to learn and grow with her.
Any other resident remarks? You went over a little, but
I'm sorry.
But no, it was, a lot of the responses took time, so I just want to make that clear publicly.
Publicly acknowledge it was my fault.
Hi, I'm Rachel Joffrey. I'll make it very quick.
That's okay, no.
Unfortunately, I am not very informed on what the proposals are, but one of my concerns are when you change the format in the schools, how is that going to be translated down to the children? I have a child that comes home traumatized just from the drills, and it's not addressed as a unit.
I just want clarification, when you mean change the format,
Like if
what
you
format are you
increase
talking
security,
Okay, so
you start to
security.
see a presence of police officers, it changes the dynamic in the building. When you start seeing people under high security, if you have a child that pays attention to detail, which I do, comes home traumatized, and it's been offered to me that she can get individual attention, but I don't know if anything's being spoken to the kids about why all these measures are taking place and in a kid-friendly term, so they understand the changing times and don't see it as a threat or a scary thing. But when my daughter comes home, I was locked in the closet, and I have to explain to her why I do it, but are the other kids thinking it and not verbalizing it? I think it has to be on both sides. I know as a parent, I'm grateful, but as, you know, my child, I also fear for her.
It's very frightening times, and the fact that we have to conduct the drills that we do and focus on some of the exercises that are necessary and required can be very scary. We have asked teachers to review their plans, to review the need for the plans on an age-appropriate basis. The explanation that is given to a student in high school differs greatly from what we discuss at Harley or Boyd. But there are some students who respond differently, bring different fears, different anxieties to school with them. They need to be addressed on an individual basis because every child reacts differently. But yes, part of our program when we do ask the students to engage in any type of drill or activity is a discussion of why we do it. I can tell you that in a kindergarten classroom, we need to do this to make sure we always have a plan to keep you safe. An active shooter drill would never be described at Harley Avenue. We describe to the children about we're looking to do things to keep you safe. And that's the way it is approached. Children at the middle school and high school are obviously far more cognizant in the middle of current events. Some of our students at Boyd painfully familiar with current events, and the teachers are forced to have more candid dialogue with them. And what we've asked them to do and what we do ourselves is reassure students that they are safe when they're in schools. It's unfortunate that there's nowhere in our society that is 100% safe. But schools are one of the safest places for our students to be because we have protocols in place, we have systems in place, and we have just a large number of faculty and staff that care so much for our children that they would make sure that they're safe should an emergency come up.
Can I say something to that?
Yes, you may, Ms. Columbus.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Mrs. Jaffe for saying that, actually, because I have young kids too, so does she, and I do think that there are really positive security changes happening, but as adults, we maybe gloss over them, and it's a really good question and statement to make sure that we all explain those changes, maybe even proactively. You know, if you're checking into a school, and now you have to buzz in, and now you have to say who you are and why you're there. And just something that's small but different that maybe a child would notice. You know, explain, oh, that's great that I have to do this. You know, I think it's a really good comment that you made, and that we could all be mindful as parents to proactively address these measures that maybe should have always been in place, frankly. It's a real positive thing, so I appreciate your comment, and I hope people at home are taking it under advisement. It's good.
One of the reasons why we, thank you Mrs. Marcus, always make sure we notify parents when drills are taking place is twofold. Number one is so if they drive by the school and see law enforcement present, they know that it's a drill. The other is so they can have a follow-up conversation and dialogue with their child when they get home. If the child comes home and says, I spent a portion of my day in the closet, we want the parent to know very specifically why and hopefully engage into the conversation about that, and so your teachers can always make sure you are safe when you're in school. So we will continue to make sure we clearly communicate what we are doing and when we are doing it to the extent that is appropriate. When the audit from covert is complete, I would have a sense that most of the security changes or enhancements that are recommended will be unknown and unseen by the students. It would be hardening systems that are already in place. And when they say, make sure there are no prop doors, make sure there are no chocks available, kids would never notice a difference. But the adult's behavior may change. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're up to our budget presentation, Ms. Kaufman.
Good evening. Today we're going to give an unscheduled budget update. We did discuss it at our last meeting based on a conversation we had and further information that was requested from the board that we felt it was timely, being that we're set to adopt the budget after spring break. So we wanted to give some updated information as to where we are at. So what we're going to go over tonight, based on our last conversation, was the middle school 9-period day proposal and class sizes. Mrs. Hull and Dr. Sapienza will go through that for the board and the community. Mental health support, which is another conversation we had, guidance counselors, psychology support, district-wide K-12. Security enhancement budget, we have some further information from the questions that came up at our last meeting. Some updated information on the tax levy, as well as the capital reserve resolution that we've been discussing since we started this conversation on the budget. So we'll actually turn it over to Mrs. Hull and Dr. Sapienza to discuss the 9-period day.
Good evening. In addition to Dr. Sapienza joining us, I just want to mention that one of our middle school teachers is with us, Mrs. Kerensky, and she is here to provide us with a teacher perspective, should the board wish to ask any questions of her while we are going through some of the information. So as Dr. Bossert indicated, when we were working with our candidates, some of the programs that we shared we were looking for, Dr. Sapienza really had some prior experience and some great ideas about. And I was really thrilled when we met very early in the year to really begin talking about what would that look like for Elwood. And when we think about our hashtag, our focused future, when we think about our mission statement, about how we ensure the success of our students in an evolving global society, I think that a lot of that is addressed in a vision. There are a lot of ways to do a 9-period day, and one of them is to simply going to put the period in, we're going to see what other things we would add into the student schedule, or perhaps have more flexibility. This is driven by a vision of providing a program for students that's accommodated through the 9-period day. So it allows us to focus on a student-centered program. It allows us to bring the teaming model that we started this year in 6th grade into 7th and 8th. There's a structural part of teaming, and then there's all of the true aspects of teaming, of philosophy. So we put a structural team in place, and we began some of the philosophies this year. But this model allows us to really move into a true teaming model. It also utilizes some new courses, which you will hear a little bit more about in terms of core extension, targeted instruction, and enrichment. In order to facilitate a 9-period day, we would be taking 4 minutes off of each period, and this does allow us to align with the high school 9-period day there. And we want to also let you know that every student would have a full lunch period within this program. A few other things to mention. It does give us some flexibility for students that have not been able to take advantage of some of our electives or have to wait to high school to start a world language because they have other types of required courses in their day. And it also gives us flexibility to enhance our special education services, for example, in our inclusion program, our ICT. When we're in the 8-period day, we have a constraint of scheduling teachers to match up with a general ed teacher based on their availability period by period. This will allow us to do a partnering also of the inclusion teacher with the gen ed students and teachers so that the teacher will have a group of special education students that they will follow through each of their 4 core content areas. So that would also strengthen that relationship and allow greater involvement of the teacher in each of their core classes with their classroom teacher. So one of the first big enhancements is really this the teaming model. And the teaming model is a central aspect of a true middle school philosophy and a middle school culture. It requires us to take each of our grade levels and divide the 4 core content teachers into 2 teams. We then take the students and assign them to one of those teams, and ideally it would be between 100 to 125 students for 4 teachers. And they share those students, so it becomes much easier for them to dialogue about students, to address parent needs, to help plan for how they assign things, provide instruction about continuity from class to class. This is how our homework is expected to be completed in this class. This is how we want you to maintain your notebooks. We start to see alignment develop as the teachers start to plan together, which makes expectations much clearer for students. We also know that it's a great way to enhance curriculum, because right now our teachers have, based on the schedule, they don't all have the same periods available to meet. A teaming model ensures that a team of teachers has a time available every day when they can come together to collaborate and plan. And that is so key to leading to some of the things that the philosophy supports. That's how they begin to structure interdisciplinary learning, how they begin to work on special engaged learning activities, and to have that real thematic approach. Also, this really sets the stage, a vision for what we want the middle school to stand for, and it empowers students by creating a sense of community, of citizenship, of academic excellence, because the belief is that as the students have this foundation, it makes them better ready and able to do their work. Another part of the enhancements that we're so excited to, that I was so excited to hear about when Dr. Sapienza started to discuss this, is the core extension period and the enrichment period. So we currently have some extended time in math and in some grade levels in ELA where the students would go every other day. What this model does is it takes that and extends it across the content areas. So you may have additional instruction in math 2 days a week, or you may have it in ELA, or you may have science or social studies. And so it allows teachers to bring in specialized programs to emphasize areas that they feel needs repetition from the regular class. And in the models that Dr. Sapienza has seen, where districts have been doing this for a number of years, it actually becomes very fluid, where the teachers can come together and say, even though on the schedule, this child is assigned to science day, this child's social studies, this child's ELA, they can be flexible during that time, because all the children have that at the same period, and all the teachers are assigned to it at the same period. And we bring in our AIS teacher, our ENL teacher, so that we have more staff to divide up among that team. Dr. Sapienza will go a little more in depth with that. Another exciting part of this is the opportunity to offer enrichment. And the areas that are targeted really align to this idea of a focused future of an evolving global community. In 6th grade, where in social studies they're studying the ancient world, we can look at world cultures. This can be done through our foreign language department, our world language department, where our teachers would be working with students to introduce them to the languages that they will have to choose between Spanish and Italian, but also to really look at world cultures and to bring in some of the things we've been doing about multicultural awareness. And that would alternate with a 6th grade seminar. Something like 9th grade seminar, but appropriate for our 6th grade, and it would allow us to address some of the areas of transition needs that students have, so that they could work together with their teacher on how to prepare for middle school, how to prepare for having multiple teachers. It would also be a time for the librarian to work with students, to bring in outside groups. And we could also begin here our study skills curriculum that we've been talking about in the curriculum committee. In 7th grade, we would be interested in coding. Coding is such an important skill for students. It has a strong mathematical connection. It's something that a lot of colleges offer freshman year now, and we want our students to have that introduction to it. It starts with, there are many programs that you can use online right now for basic coding, but it really begins to teach them that logical sequence and development. For grade 8, we are interested in doing science, technology, engineering, and math modules. This would be interdisciplinary, project-based, and it would also be a time for us to talk about research, about information retrieval, and again, a theme we've talked about a lot at curriculum committee and our curriculum conversation evenings, to really have a formal curriculum. All of these would require planning. So if this proposal is approved, we would be looking then to post for summer curriculum writing for our faculty and staff to engage in to prepare for the courses. So the question for the 9-period day is, how are we funding it? And it's happening through a few different ways. The first thing is that my understanding of prior recommendations for a 9-period day were really replicating a high school model, where you have to have a certain number of courses in each department, a certain number of electives. The fact that this first brings in the core extension period, where you have all the students block scheduled, and then you have all your staff available at that one period, that actually takes the place of what in a different type of model would take multiple periods to do. Then the fact that we take our extended time that students have right now just in math and we spread it across the content area, that also allows us to meet the 9-period day requirement without increasing staffing for that. There's also some just very good timing. Last year, we did increase staffing temporarily for 1 year, and that was to allow us to have a full period of earth science lab for 8th graders. And you may recall students were not having a full period of lab, and they were not having a full lunch. So in order to make that happen, we had to move some electives around in the schedule. And we had to run a double year of health, because of students who, we were moving health from 8th to 7th, but the students who were in 7th last year still needed to have it in 8th. So we had to double that up. And also, it's coming at the same time that some of our enrollment is declining, so in some areas there might be one less section. And the other piece of it is that extended instruction period, that core extension, because lining all the students up for that course at one period also reduces the staffing need that would happen if you were trying to replicate a high school 9-period model. So there's also some good timing there. But a lot of it is driven through the vision of the coursework that Dr. Sapienza has brought to us. We've also been paying attention to class size. I know that's something that's certainly been discussed here and at our curriculum meetings. And our core content areas would be held between 22 to 24. And that's our math, science, English, and social studies. Our electives would be pretty much what they are now, somewhere between 26 to 29, depending on the course of the period. This is a block scheduling model, so the students are moving as cohorts. So we do not anticipate some of the things that we've experienced in the past, where you have a class of 31, a class of 15 for the same subject. Because of the teaming, we're able to have a much better balancing and building the master schedule. Now, Dr. Sapienza has been working on this for quite a while now to come up with a really concrete proposal where it's not just about the vision and the ideas, but it's practical. And so working with Mrs. Valley, working with Mr. Schwartz, they've actually already started to look at what this would look like in a student management system. And so we're able to really show you some specific examples of what the actual student day would look like. And if the proposal is meets with your approval, one of our next steps would be scheduling evening presentations for parents, so that we would explain our proposal to them. We also have a scheduled evening for incoming 6th grade parents, so we would take advantage of the orientation to do that, and continuing to work with our faculty and staff, because it's really a collaborative effort, and a lot of this is empowering teachers to take advantage of those enrichment and core extension periods to do things that they might not otherwise be able to do within the school day, which is the same reason why we're able to bring in more focus on research skills, because that opportunity opens up. So,
Mrs. Hull, may I just interject for a moment? This proposal did not work if the faculty was not supportive of it. The faculty needs to change some of their current practices and adopt some new thinking and some new skills that they will bring into the classroom. So I think Dr. Sapienza did a good job identifying some teacher leaders to include in the initial stages of the discussion. And then once plans became more concrete, she presented it to the faculty, got feedback, got input, made some changes based upon that input, and moved forward in partnership with them. I don't want to speak for the faculty, but from everything we can gather, this is a proposal that is being strongly supported by the teachers here in the middle school. And I'm sure that those present will tell me otherwise if I'm not correct. But I think that's an integral part of the success of the program, is that the teachers are in favor of it. We will continue to support and provide professional development to the teachers in the areas that will be new for them, and give them common planning time, curriculum writing initiatives, and everything else that is necessary to make the transition positive. But that's a very important piece of the puzzle.
Are there any other questions before we move into the actual schedule?
I do. The teaming model, I'm excited about the teaming model. We talked about this for probably 15 years as well. More than that, right? And we actually attempted it a couple of times, but it didn't really work out because I think the philosophy behind it wasn't maybe worked out as well as it is tonight. I don't know. But some of the issues that we ran into was that we shared staff with other schools, with Boyd and with the high school. Is there less of that going on, or is there the same amount of shared staff?
There's definitely less of it. I can think of maybe one core content teacher who will be shared, but there
used to be a lot more.
Yeah, there is still in some of the special areas, but as I'm thinking of our core content, I think that's it.
And then the only question I had with teaming, I understand the philosophy, and I think it's wonderful. My sister teaches in a teaming middle school, and can't believe we don't have it, and all that kind of thing. But is there any concern that with Elwood being so small, that you're always with the same people from kindergarten until the time you're a senior, that sometimes when kids get to middle school, they're excited to go into different classes and see other different kids? Will the social, the ability to make new friendships, or if you get in a team that maybe is not 100% your cup of tea, are we planning on changing the teams in between grades? Like you wouldn't be on the same 6th, 7th, and 8th team, with the same group of kids, or does that go against the philosophy? What about the social aspect, especially in Elwood where you're with the same kids a lot?
That is something that we have discussed, and I'm actually going to invite Dr. Sapienza to address that because she's had so many conversations with the faculty around that.
Thank you. And just before I answer your question, I just wanted to thank everybody for their kind comments tonight, but just say that I have not done this alone. The support of Dr. Bossert, Mrs. Hull, Mrs. Lachlan, the staff, the PTA has been very supportive, Mrs. Sally and Mr. Schwartz. We've been working on this since October. It's been many hours of dream and FTEs, and I'm just very appreciative of all the support and opportunity. I just want to say that quickly. So teaming can take on very different forms, and it is the philosophy that districts have to create and adapt. I've had the good fortune of working in many districts, and for some districts, the teams stayed together for 2 or 3 years. The teachers actually even moved with them. That was one model I worked in. But for us right now, with the support of the teachers, we are looking to have students enter a team in 6th grade, but they're not locked in that team as they move on in 7th and 8th. Additionally, and maybe we could go to the sample student schedule. I think you'll see opportunities where students are not teamed all day. Because I can certainly see that concern that our teams will be about 95, which is really the targeted number of students that you would like to have on a team. 95 to 100 is really a great number. So I'm just going to have you look at 7th grade, just as a reference point. The highlighted areas where you see that they're in their content core academics are the only time students are in their team. Additionally, core extension, which is 9th period. So those are your team's academic periods, that they're in those smaller groups, but they are not traveling in a true blocked schedule where you're with your social studies class and social studies, and then that same cohort of students move to science and social studies and English. So amongst your 95 on your team, you have opportunities to mix and mingle. Additionally, in the periods where you'll see again in 7th grade, periods 1, 2, 5, and 6, those are what we would call multi-team periods. where students, the whole grade, can be mixed together. So if you get on blue team and your best friend happens to be on white team, we can have opportunities that they are together throughout the day. So it's really a portion of their day that's in the core academics, but not their full middle school day.
But even within that core, you're mixing.
Correct.
I see.
So how do you're putting the teams together, how do you profile to put those teams together? Because I remember when my daughter was several years ago, was in middle school in Milwaukee, they tried teaming. It was always like, oh, that's the smart team, and this is. So how do you avoid that? How do you create the ideal team?
You're absolutely right. Something you have to really be mindful of is not creating an elitist team. So for example, if you look at 8th grade, it'd be very important not to create one team that only offers the Common Core Algebra class or the Earth Science. So the way that you do that is you offer both of those classes on both teams. So that this way you have students of multiple and varying abilities on your teams. Additionally, you have to be mindful of the way that you assign your special education students. So you wouldn't take one team and put all of your integrated co-teaching resource room E&L students on one team. So you really do have to very mindfully place students, but make sure that you are spreading all of the wealth to create those teams. I just want to quickly then look at the sample schedule just one more time. So you can see in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the most important part of teaming is that the core academic classes are happening at the same time. As Mrs. Hull spoke about, that really helps you not run into those situations where you have a class size of 32 and you have a class size of 16. When that happens, it typically means that there's a singleton or some class that is offered that students can't take at any other time. So maybe your Spanish or your Italian. So by having your academic periods all offered at the same time, you can distribute the students evenly amongst their academic classes. And you can see where our other classes are, where again, as I mentioned, they will be multi-team, so they have those opportunities to build relationships.
You can tell me if this is premature, but I have a question about core extension. Can I ask?
I will be getting to slides.
Then I'm going to save it.
Okay. So any questions about what a sample student schedule might look like? So the core extension, what's important to understand is what you're looking at is just a sample of what would exist on one team. So you would have this model, again, if I'm just talking about 7th grade, there would be two matrices that look like this. So if we were looking at this for argument's sake, we would say we're looking at team 7-1. So we would have our 4 content area teachers, our AIS support teachers, and potentially an ENL or a special education teacher. So the idea, and this is one that is sometimes difficult to conceptualize, but we try to do our best to lay it out. Our school will now be running on a 1 through 6 schedule. But really the only time it matters if it's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 is core extension. All of our other classes will be running on an odd and even. So phys ed, health, all of those classes, it really will just be instead of A day, B day, it would be odd even. So now when you get into your core extension period, as Mrs. Hall mentioned, the entire team is available, as are their teachers. So the dream one day is really that this is the period that the teachers very fluidly manage their students. They meet regularly in their team meeting time, and they may separate students regularly depending on the topic and how their students are doing. In the very beginning, it's very helpful to have a schedule so students know where to go. And again, the dream would be the teachers before, their 6th grade or 7th grade teachers would help group them going forward. We would use multiple measures. Really, teacher recommendation is a big part of that. Our STARS assessment, the New York State assessment where appropriate, to put these students in the groups. But the most important thing to understand is that they're fluid, which is the true intention of AIS. It should not be a life sentence just because you need it in September. It doesn't mean you should have to stay there in December and January. Or even if there's just something really exciting going on in one of the other topics, you should have the ability to take part in that. So that's what this model allows to happen. So we would group students based on level in the left-hand column, as far as approaching standards, meeting and exceeding. And then from there, you would go across the 6-day cycle of what their day would look like. So if you look at the first student with approaching standards, they would have 2 sections of AIS, and you see that on day 1 and 3, AIS math, and then 2 sections of AIS English in day 2 and 4. It still leaves them the opportunity for an enriching experience in social studies and science. We're working with our teachers right now to develop the class. Our hope is really, again, for it to be driven by teacher passion. So some of the topics that the teachers have come up with in social studies was marrying current events to the topics that they're currently learning. And I think my most exciting is science. We're talking about some type of Mythbusters activity that would immerse the students in research-based activities, but make it fun and engaging for them as well. Have student choice, where they could choose the topics with which they're working on, and really make it a time of exploration, both in social studies and science. As you proceed down, the courses would obviously change and evolve over time to meet the needs of the students. And again, those are very fluid models. So we know even our students who are meeting standards or possibly exceeding them might have a topic that they're struggling with. They might have, they might just hit a little blip in that radar, and we have the opportunity, without changing their schedule or messing up their whole lives, to take them for a couple of days and have them work with their math teacher. And that's another point of the core extension that's really important, is that these targeted instruction is given by the teachers who are with them every single day. So instead of going and outsourcing your AIS to a teacher who may not know you that well because they just see you one period a day, it's really the teacher and the team who can really see you globally that can place you as needed in these different courses.
So you said, you're breaking these students up into approaching standards, meeting standards, exceeding standards, and the way you come about that is through multiple measures.
Correct.
So it's not, it's the teacher recommendation and a combination of testing.
Correct.
Okay. But the teacher chooses that.
Teacher. And even as I said before, on a daily basis. So your student who may be in that exceeding standards, going to his his math on day 5 and day 6, got his math test back, and there was a particular targeted area that he was really struggling in. The math teacher might say, you know what, I'm going to take him with this other group today so I can really target that instruction, and then have him go back and join his regular group another time. So it's really to be fluid and really can be topic driven as well as just ongoing assessment.
And how do you do that if there's not equal numbers of students? Because then it seems like you'd be in a position where that middle group of students would have a lot more students than the other two groups.
Sure, no, that's a great question. There is a lot of staff available during this time, so your groups will be small because we're adding the AIS support there as well as the 4 content area teachers.
So it's not a regular sized classroom?
Correct.
Okay.
This answers my question. I was just going to clarify that for the core extension that we're breaking up into different skills and ability levels to get everyone exactly what they need to move a little further ahead. I love that. I love that we're integrated in all the core classes, and I love that we pull out different skills and abilities for this core extension. I think that's wonderful. It meets everybody's needs. So now I didn't have a question. I just had to say bravo for that. I love that. It's wonderful. Bravo.
Thank you.
So again, I just want to mention that Mrs. Kransky's here if you had any questions from a teacher perspective.
I have one more question on core extension, and maybe you don't see it often. What if you had a child that was exceptional in math and really nothing else? You had, a stellar topical thing where really you're exceeding standards more than everybody else in something, but everything else is barely meeting standards. Would that child get the exceptional math pull-out, or would it be an overall achievement?
I actually have seen that happen before, and we are able, this is sort of a sample, but we are able to customize. We're able to sort of look at what's being offered and when, and get the students in during those periods. And even within those classes, there's opportunities to differentiate. So, we always want the teachers, even if it's a group of 12, 13, or 14, not to just be teaching this straight down the middle. So you might have opportunities where maybe it's a little higher level than the student might be capable of, but we feel like by breaking them up into groups and really differentiating that instruction, they're able to get what they need.
And will there be any opportunity to work one-on-one in this type of schedule, or is there?
There certainly can be. Again, part of what really makes the core extension work so beautifully is the collaboration and communication of the teachers, which still then goes back to that teaming model where they have that common planning time every single day. So there is absolutely opportunities for teachers who might say, can you take my group today, and they're working on some type of project, and they might keep 1 or 2 students back to do something one-on-one. The beauty of it is, again, that those 95 students are owned by those 4, and then you add 5, 6, or 7 teachers during the sport extension time, that they can break them up as needed.
I just want to say thank you. This is a brilliant presentation. I have been asking for a 9-period day and have been told for many, many, many years that we just can't do it without a substantial cost attached to it. You guys have been super creative. I feel like over the years we've lost almost the importance of social studies, science, and other content areas, and we had double English, double math, and we've been pounded with that for year after year after year. And now this provides students with an opportunity to get help in areas that they may be lacking in during the school day. I'm thrilled about the class size reduction, excited about the enhanced opportunities for electives. The fact that there's staff buy-in is first and foremost, because if you don't have staff buy-in, it's going to fall apart. So I applaud you for the communication and thank the staff for taking this on. If this should obviously get passed, we're not there yet. I'm fingers crossed we will be. And the one thing that I was concerned about was the cohort of children in each grouping, but you have addressed that, and I feel confident that you will mindfully break up those groups accordingly. And I think the study skills seminar is super important because I think our children are lacking basic study skills, and I'm just blown away. Thank you so much, everybody that's been involved.
In addition to saying thank you for all the positive feedback, and I'll get to my thank yous for the staff, I just want to make one point clear. This is a budget-neutral presentation. We're not asking the board to authorize any additional expenses associated with this transition, but I do need to offer the caveat that should we propose a budget that does not meet with voter approval, and we need to look for ways to decrease our expenses. The last modification we made to this proposal was a class size reduction initiative. We added some staffing that helps us to maintain 22 to 24 in the core areas. So should we run into a financial question, the only change we would make to this proposal, hold your ears, Mrs. Bell, would be larger class sizes. We wouldn't be looking to move away from the 9-period day, the team approach, or anything else. The only cost that we are bearing that we would have to revisit is what enables us to have such attractive class sizes.
And what would those numbers, like, are you talking what kind of percentage, 5% or?
The last thing we did was add 1 full-time teacher equivalent to have additional sections in each of those core areas.
Okay.
So without that enhancement, our 20 to 24 escalates to 26 to 29.
Okay, and that would be a budget of?
It's a swing of about $120,000.
Okay. So when we get back to talking to numbers, Karen, we had equated every percentage to be a certain amount of money, and maybe we can just reiterate or emphasize what that would be.
The only Carrie might give you the death stare for this one, but for me, the 9-period day, the way we presented it, is a non-negotiable item in the budget.
Absolutely.
And should we look for other areas that we need to decrease to get to a certain percentage targeted by the board, and this is not the first place I'd look.
Okay, so what you're telling us is the 9-period day is there, and that because it's budget neutral, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and that's the last, we would look for other options.
Yes.
Other than reducing, the staff would be, well, not the staff, the class size would be the ultimate
That would be a last resort item,
That's,
yes.
okay, that's.
There is a savings we could realize within this transition, but it would lead to class sizes in the core areas from shifting from 22 to 24 to 26 to 29 as we have outlined for the special areas. And for me, that's not optimal, and it's not reflective of the overall goals we're trying to achieve. So that would be a last resort modification.
Thank you, job well done.
I will also echo that yes, job well done, and I want to go back a couple of years and speak from the student perspective, and just a couple of years.
It's a lot more than a couple now.
There you go. Thank you for recognizing that, because I do feel like I'm out of middle school quite some time. So when I was in middle school, we had, you could take the earth science course. And in order to take earth science, you were eating your lunches, you were walking down the hallway and getting there. And it was great. You got to take earth science, but you really didn't get to get that social aspect. And I think lunch, especially in this day and age, you need it. Instead of sitting on your cell phone, texting outside, or not engaging with your peers, I think lunch has become, and it should if it's not, becoming more of a social environment where, you know, you talked about, I think Mrs. Coster spoke about, how do you engage all the students? How do you get them into dialogue? How do you know, someone who's fighting a struggle or who's frustrated, or it's the talking. It's great that we have the peer programs in place, but if the peer programs and a lot of the students who are on natural helpers are taking the earth science course, and the lunch period is the time where they get to have that conversation, what good is it if those students aren't in the cafeteria? So I have an on period, I think that affords the opportunity for the students to engage in the conversation, and lunch was my favorite period, so I think it's great that we have it, which I love, as you can tell. And also, as Ms. Melinda said, this seminar.
Math is mine.
It better than 15.
I was good at math too. I would count one sandwich plus two sandwich means I had a full stomach. It was great. I knew exactly how to do it. But the seminar portion in the 6th grade, I think that is something that's so, I can't believe we don't have it. I remember coming back as a freshman in college and speaking to the high school. A bunch of us came back and I'm like, what would you have wanted that we don't have now? And the biggest thing was, it's great that we have the 9th grade seminar for study skills. But by the time you get to the 9th grade, you already need to know those study skills. You already need to have your practices in place. You have to have your regimen, you know, how to plan for your periods and your classes. And sometimes you have tests that happen to fall on the same day. And how do you adjust your schedules? You don't know how to do that at 9th grade, right? You know, 13, 14 years old, you don't have a clue. But if you had that in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you were able to practice that and own that skill. By the time you got to high school, you would then take that study skills course or, you know, the seminar and really utilize it and pick the teacher's brain and get what you need out of that course. I know sometimes that course falls to the wayside and people say, you know, the students aren't getting anything out of it, but by having it in the 6th grade and coming up the ranks there, I think that becomes something that is really important. And I just want to say it's great. I'm very excited. I'm glad it's at a portion of, you know, if you will, budget neutral. And I think it's long overdue. And I'm so appreciative to everybody who's, you know, got on board with this and was able to find a way to make it come to fruition. I think it's long overdue, as I said. Great job, guys.
I just want to follow up with another comment. I know that there are two different thoughts about the freshman seminar in the high school. And people think that, you know, it's a waste of a period. And I've had a different experience with that. Both of my children actually really utilize that period. And maybe if they're not doing something that is worthwhile for them specifically for that day, they utilize that period to go to AIS services for math and social studies or whatever they need. And they do learn library skills and other things. So I think that class gives you the flexibility of how you personally need to utilize it. And although some children may not need it as much as others, there is flexibility to do more enrichment opportunities, you know, more self-help. So I'm happy to see it come in 6th grade as well.
I have to
transition.
Heather's remarks. I do believe that as a parent, all of my kids, the 3 of them that have gone through the 9th grade seminar, have come out with a good experience and have learned skills from it. I just wanted to elaborate on something that James had said about getting the study skills now that it's introduced in 6th grade. And Julia can attest to this, and Mrs. Hull can attest to it. We have worked very diligently in curriculum to look toward a K through 12 study skills, because when the littlest Tomio comes into Harley, that from the first day that, you know, James Jr. steps in
This is not an announcement.
It's not an announcement, it's just, you know, tells Stoney that those children, he will be, and those children, he or she, will develop those skills starting from K on. And I think that that's really a great move, and it's a vision
No, I agree. We're working on that.
We have had, and we have tried to really, and thank you to Mrs. Hull for helping us to see our vision and to really bring it to life. And, you know, also Dr. Sapienza, because this is what you're doing at the middle school level for us.
So I think you can hear that we're all excited. and we're behind the staff, and you know, it's just like Teachers College. You know, the staff really is doing something completely different than what they're used to, but yet they're all willing to do it and up for the challenge, and that says a lot about who you are as a staff, that you're willing to work together and work out the kinks, and it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to have to revisit some things, and we all understand that there's going to be trials and tribulations and tweaking and all those things, and that's what it should be. So we're really happy and we're really proud. And the seminar is awesome because in 6th grade, really, you need to organize. It's really all about organization. It's about study skills, but it's about, you know, how do you carry your books around and go to your locker and do all those things. The one thing that I just want you to address, because I know people approached me about it with a 9-period day, was music. And many people would love to see music as part of the day, like it is in the high school if you choose to do music, and not have to come in, because many kids can't have to choose between going to extra help before a test or going to their music lesson. Many kids during the day get pulled out for music lessons, and so, you know, if you come from my house, you don't miss algebra, you know, things like that. So will they be deciding to miss one of these enrichment things, or how would you address, or how would you answer a parent as to why do I still have to bring my child to school early when you're adding another period to a day? Why can't that be included in the day?
We've actually discussed this, and I've met with the music department, and there are a few pieces to it. The large group ensembles that occur outside the school day right now, even if that was moved into the school day, there would still be the rotational lesson period. And so that rotates.
Just like at the high school.
Yeah, it rotates through 6 periods. So when it's working ideally, a student is missing a class once every 6 weeks or once every 30 lessons when the rotation is followed with fidelity. So if the large ensemble is before the school day or during the school day, you still have that rotation lesson, which we know creates challenges in terms of students needing to be in 2 places at once, which makes it a challenge. So I think our faculty does work together, particularly here in the middle school, to have that as part of the student's day. We did look at what to do with our enrichment period, because that opened the door for, let's say, a general music class, or traditional music class, or as our department discussed some of the electives, such as a few years ago they had an elective around pop music, I believe. So what we were thinking about at this time is that we would like to launch the enrichment as is and continue to dialogue with the music department on where exactly the students get that 7th and 8th grade music experience.
That was the only other comment that I had, which the 7th grade is coding and the 8th grade is some other kind of STEM initiative. And that seems to be targeted toward a certain group of kids that may be very talented in science and math. But there are other students that their passion is English or the arts or and we took general music out of the rotation a number of years back, so students were never really taught how to read music. So students that are now in the high school, there was a big transition where you went into the high school knowing how to read music from middle school. You don't have that anymore. So they're starting to learn how to read music in high school unless they're taking private lessons. So I would just have that in the back of my mind, that it's the coding and the STEM are really current and something that we want to work on in the district, but how there are students that may be talented in other areas that.
Christina, do you know off the top of your head what percentage of our total middle school population participate in either the band or the orchestra?
We did look at the number. I'm trying to remember. We looked at band, chorus, orchestra, and then additional students. It was a small percentage. Yeah, it was a small percentage. And we did examine the potential of, for example, reducing STEM to, it's an every other day now, which is half a year. If it was to be half of the year every other day for a quarter experience, and then the music class every other day the other half of the year. That's another thing that we looked at. But we're also looking at curriculum writing in the music department because all of our band, chorus, and orchestra students have the potential to leave middle school being fluent in reading music notes and rhythms. So we're also looking at the scope and sequence and articulation. Like we have a lot of articulation built into our academic departments. For example, Superintendent's Conference Day, we bring together our 6-12 science and math and social studies departments so they can really look into scope and sequence. Our music teachers tend to go to very specific trainings, which are excellent on those days, geared just to their area of expertise, but then we don't get to take advantage of their articulation time. So that's also one of the things that we're doing as part of this, because I think scope and sequence writing really does help address gaps. And the articulation between the faculty members allows them each to really see where the gap is. It's almost like a benefit that happens when a team is together for planning, when a department is together 6-12, they really begin to focus on their priorities. So we're definitely addressing bringing, first of all, of course, our music department is phenomenal. I mean, every concert and production I go to, I always walk out so amazed at the talent of our students and faculty. So we want to enhance that. But there are other things, for example, bringing in the grade books was one of the things that we addressed. Grade books has continued to really push forward. When the Common Core standards came out, they readjusted their program, and they stay current. They really work to be programs that can enrich students. So we're hoping also that that will add some areas of opportunity.
I appreciate that, thank you. And the scope and sequence with the science teachers at the high school, I'm sure, all this research is going to be, a kickoff to if kids are interested in science research, because that's another thing that got taken out of our budget was that intro to science research in 9th grade. So if they can get some of that started here with ideas and learning how to read scientific articles and critiquing them and things like that in 8th grade, that could jumpstart them nicely, but it's wonderful.
Thank you so much for your very positive comments. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sapienza, and your team, the middle school and our directors. I have to tell you, all of the meetings are so synergistic as these very exciting ideas have been brought forward and developed, and we're all very appreciative. So next I was going to talk about our additional mental health support. So after our last board meeting, we were looking at the addition of a K-12 mental health provider, and we are specifically looking at a psychologist. The vision that we're looking at for the psychologist would be that they would be based at district office. However, they would be available to respond if there was a crisis in a building, and also to assist staff in the buildings depending on what the specific needs are. The ideal candidate would have BCBA or Board Certified Behavior Analyst credential, which indicates they've had specific training in addressing behavioral needs. And we would also be looking for someone with experience in developing functional behavioral assessments and behavior improvement plans and other strategies that help to intervene when students are experiencing a challenge. Also, this would be an opportunity to increase our support for parents, looking at short-term parent counseling or training, and also bringing in some of the community agencies that are around us to offer support to our parents and students, and help parents when they are looking for something specific to identify that resource in the community and to help parents through that referral process. We would also envision that this person would allow our building-based psychologists to have more contact time with students. And that would be through taking away some of the tasks that are consistent every year related to annual review preparation, the CSC meetings, things such as the required classroom observation that occurs before a meeting, doing some of the testing. So we're also looking to see a little shift in the responsibilities in that regard. And I also just want to mention that I want to thank Mrs. Wilkinson for her insights around this position, because we spent time dialoguing with Dr. Bossert on what what would really best help our school psychologists and our mental health providers to give the extra coverage that would help us to better able to meet students' needs. Any questions?
There is a however. This position was not included in the initial budget proposal. This is something that we put together as a proposal based upon our discussion with the board at the last meeting when we talked about finding a balance between safety and mental health, making sure we were doing things proactively on both sides of that equation, so that if the board is interested in this position being part of the operating budget, you know that we're looking to creep closer towards that tax levy limit than stay closer to that 2.5% we initially discussed.
So this is outside of the 2.5% proposed.
Which is more likely a 2.6%, but it is an add-on, yeah.
So to continue with those add-ons and conversation of security and the topics we discussed at our last meeting, in addition to the mental health support team, we were looking at other areas within security and safety of the district. And one which Dr. Boss had already mentioned was a security audit that we already started right after the board meeting. The following day, we engaged in a contract with Covert Investigations. So we're using this year's monies to do that audit. We're reviewing those recommendations with the Safety Committee in April. And from there, we'll start looking to see what kind of projects that may be recommended out of there that we could use Smart Schools money. We do still have some money left. And also maybe fund some portions of the enhancements using the general fund 2018-19, of which those monies are not in the budget at this point in time. So another conversation was vestibules in all buildings. Conversation came up in our security forum that we had. It has been an ongoing conversation, I think, statewide. What we did is the next day after that meeting as well is we reached out to PBIS. We reached out to Park East, who is the construction manager on the bond. They have stepped up to assist us with this immediately. And from that, we also talked to a BOCES approved vendor that wouldn't require bidding or anything in order to get us a as close to accurate quote to build these vestibules in all 4 buildings. So you can see here the dollar values. It's just about $1 million to do all 4 buildings, Harley being the most because that building would need actually to extend out. So it's outside construction that would be required at Harley. Boyd already has one. It would just be reconfiguring what's already there and moving some heating elements around. Middle school, we have enough space here in the hallway as well as John Glenn High School to create those vestibules. These are not final numbers. These are rough estimates we were able to gain in 1 week's time. They literally came in this morning, hot off the press. So I, credit our vendors for working quickly. Our architects turned draft sample drawings over to them as fast as they could so that they could do building walkthroughs this week and get these numbers to us. So these are some things that we're looking at that could potentially be funded with Smart Schools money. It could be funded with additional support of the tax levy. So the conversation that we need to figure out of where we want to go continues. Additional security guards were added to all buildings outside and inside. So after school sporting events are now secured. We have 2 guards on roaming all the fields in addition to the regular guards we already have, in addition to our supervisory staff at all of the events and practices. That started for the spring season at the high school and will continue through the middle school spring season as well. So the question is how do we fund these type of items? The current budget that we've been proposing to the board that we have up to this point in time, we've gone through all 3 components, is within our levy limit, which is 4.2%. The proposed budget is a 2.5% levy increase. Again, it's below the allowable limit for the Elwood School District, requiring a simple majority vote. Allocating the funds in the operational budget just for security enhancements would obviously require additional revenue from the taxpayers, anywhere between 2.5% to 4.2% to stay within that simple majority vote area. That I think is what's key. That is something that from our conversations that the board is looking to do, is stay under that 4.2, but where is the happy medium? Where are we comfortable with going? So to kind of help guide that conversation, here's a chart we put together showing you every 0.5% of how much money would be added to the budget to help security items. We don't have the specific security items at this point in time. As we're waiting the covert investigation audit, we do know what the vestibules would cost. If we went to 4%, that's $670,000 additional into the budget. That, along with the Smart Schools money, could fund that $1 million worth of vestibule building. It would not be projects that you would see immediately. We would potentially be able to get maybe 2 buildings done next year, but the others would have to wait on Smart Schools approval, which at this time is quite lengthy. They are short-staffed at SED, which seems to be the answer for everything when you call them, is they don't have enough staff members.
Wait, Carrie, I'm confused. The vestibules is if we went to 4%, we could pay for the vestibules.
You could only probably pay for 2 vestibules.
2.
You wouldn't be able to get all 4 vestibules.
For the 4%.
Correct.
Okay, so when you say additional security items,
That's the conversation to be had. It's whether or not vestibules are the way we want to go.
Right.
Is that the recommendation from covert? It's waiting to see that audit.
So we're getting that covert after we have a budget approval vote. So how do we make that decision?
I think that what we're asking the board is to provide flexibility within the budget so that we can identify the priorities within the audit to spend the money. We know that the number of recommendations will exceed this allocation. I'm certain of that. So we would have to then take the funds that the board feels comfortable asking the taxpayers for and then prioritizing the recommendations made within the covert analysis. I will also share that Carrie mentioned the available funds that we have through Smart Schools, which are there. It's our money. However, we need to go through a lengthy approval process to access it. One of the things that has been discussed in every occasion of safety discussion with our elected officials is cutting back the red tape on accessing Smart Schools money. The Smart Schools money not being available is inhibiting many districts from doing things that we think greatly enhance the safety of our students and staff. So one of the governor's charges, along with the Senate and the Assembly, is charging NYSED with improving that process and decreasing the wait time to access that money. And the governor has said, he has charged the commissioner with making it happen. Right now, the department that approves the Smart Schools proposals is 2 individuals, and one of them is currently out on a maternity leave. That is clearly unacceptable for 700 plus school districts in the state of New York.
So how much money do we have left in that Smart School?
We have just about $600,000 left. We spent, the current project we're finishing up right now is between 4 and 5. We're waiting for final numbers to come through as we've had adjustments going on. But we have about $600,000 remaining in Smart Schools funding. Our total allocation was $1.1 million.
Right, that I remember, okay.
The 2 things that I think we have to make sure that we advertise to the community once we decide on what levy the board is comfortable with. This is kind of a rewind back to the old days. We had to assess what you believe the feelings and support level will be in the community. For the last several years when the tax levy limit was so low at 2% or below, you went to your cap. Now that we have more flexibility in our cap at 4.21%, the board has to gauge what they think the community's comfort level will be. What I think can't be stressed strongly enough is that we are under the allowable cap at any number up to 4.21%, and that the additional funds we are asking the community to support will be used to enhance the security of the district.
It's just really tough for me, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, to pick a number if I don't know what I'm getting for it.
If the board decides that the vestibules are a top priority, and I can tell you that covert is in favor of the vestibules for certain. I'm not sure if they will place it as the top priority, but they are certainly in favor. What Carrie has learned through our architects and engineers is that we can finance approximately 2 of the vestibules by going to 4% at the tax levy limit, and then finance the other 2 remaining buildings through the Smart Schools initiative. That we feel very comfortable in saying.
I just have a question. As far as the school psychologist goes, I saw a budget of about $95,000, right? Does that fall? So it was in excess of the levy of 2.5. So we're at 2.75, 3%. Where does that position fall for us as far as our levy percent?
adding that additional 100,000 would probably be at like 2.6 or change, which is what, as Dr. Haas alluded to, yeah.
That's what the 2.6.
We could land, yeah, between 2.6, 2.75 is somewhere where we would land by adding in that additional mental health support. Keep in mind, we did add already in the 2.5 is the additional guidance counselor, that's already included, and that's at the high school level. So adding this psychologist, K-12, is letting us get ahead of the mandate that is coming in 2019, 2020. So whether we take on that cost now onto the budget, we will have to take it on next year. So it's just a matter of when.
I don't
We
know
have
what
the
CPI will be
flexibility.
next year.
Correct. We have the flexibility right now, and it becomes part of our regular rollover budget after this year then.
And what Carrie has said on every occasion when we've talked about the tax levy limit, but bears repeating, the more we collect is increasing our base, which impacts all future funding. It is painful to make a recommendation below 4.21% because we are leaving money on the table this year and for all future years. We understand that the board needs to make a proposal that they feel reflects what the community will support. And 4.21% is a large number as compared to the 2% we put up last year. However, it will impact our fiscal standing this year and all future years.
Just one more question to go off of this on this slide. Might be on the next slide. I don't think so though. If we were to go at the proposed 4%, I won't make eye contact with you because I don't want you to. It's one way of not getting engaged. It's not look at you. So, if we were to go at the levy max, and let's say we're doing a proposal, we're going to adopt that April 12th meeting, and we're not going to know the reports from covert until after, but we think safety is in excess. We need that other, 1.5% to get to what we need to meet what covert is recommending. If covert comes in and recommends something a lot less, and we have this, 1.5% on the table, and we're not going to use it all for safety. So we're suggesting, and that's the, proposal, but we use, say, 0.75%. The other 0.75%, is that going into the general budget? Are we allocating that? I don't want to just see that excess money get thrown to safety if it's not going to actually have an impact to the children. I understand maxing the levy, not leaving money on the table, but I don't want to just do that and then throw an extra security guard because we have that money.
The board does not, in April, when we adopt a budget, you do that. You adopt an expenditure budget. You don't adopt your tax levy. You're adopting a revenue source and a budget because they have to balance. So we have the funding potentially coming through the tax levy. We adopt an expenditure budget that the community can vote on in May, and that budget's adopted in April, and it's expenses. So that expenditure budget, whether it be 61 million, 62, 63 million, whatever we may land on, it's the expenditures. In October, late September, early October, is when the board sets the tax levy. So it's at that point in time, the board has the authorization to set a tax levy with voter approval that we've passed a successful budget, anywhere from 0 levy increase to 4.2% levy increase.
Correct.
So that flexibility is there on the board, and you have time to figure that out. Should additional funding come through, say in June or July, the state comes through and says they're throwing $500,000 at districts for security funding, we wouldn't have to levy that money in October then. So we wouldn't be hitting that limit. So it's got to keep in mind is what you're adopting is an expenditure budget. There is money then on the table for
so my
future
point
years.
is if we do at least go there and we don't utilize that money for safety.
If we don't utilize the money, it goes into fund balance.
That's where it's going to go, fund balance.
Correct.
Okay. I think the community needs to know that, if we're going to list it as security purposes, but we might not utilize all that. We still are, maxing out the levy, getting the money we need, not leaving on the table. What's happening with it? I would want to know where the rest of that money is.
Correct. If we say let's add $500,000 more to the proposed budget, and after the review, we're adding maybe the school psychologist, that's $100,000. So we have $400,000 left to continue to assess our security needs and enhancements that we want to add to the district. We maybe only spend another $200,000 because maybe we're going to come up with a plan over the next course of a few years. The additional $200,000 is savings on the general fund expenditures. So at the end of the school year, it goes into the unallocated fund balance, which becomes future use and causing fiscal stability.
Honestly, I don't see that happening with $760,000.
Me neither, but the answer to the
Unless,
question.
okay.
I do want to bring some clarity for the board.
Yeah.
I think the state's going for people at home, I think the state is going to throw some money at this. I don't know if it's going to be this calendar year or next calendar year. I just want to know that if they do, where do we fall with our money? So we go with the general budget, future expenditures, the answer to the question. Thank you.
I also want to bring some clarity because we referred to the covert audit on several occasions. After meeting with Don Flynn, who's kind of directing the ship on the audit, I have a sense we're going to hear more about hardening systems and changing practices than we will hear about hard assets that need to be purchased. I do expect to hear something about vestibules because we previously discussed that, but I don't anticipate hearing large dollar allocations towards things like metal detection, bulletproof glass, things of that nature. There's also an understanding within covert, because they work so closely with K-12, that we all have finite resources. So they won't make recommendations of things they know that we can't fiscally support. So I expect to hear more about process, behaviors, systems, reunifications. That's what I expect to glean the most value from the covert evaluation. I'm not expecting to see a list of potential expenses the district should incur.
Thank you. I'm just like, you say that, I'm like, all right, the SRO, the resource officer comes out and we're able to fund a portion of it. We have that money in the general budget. Now I want to be able to keep the flexibility open if need be. It's kind of, without leaving money on the table, kind of just throw it out there.
The Harley vestibule is $360,000. Where would that, so that would be about 3.25%.
Right, and that's a low number. There are still some pieces that we don't have.
I was going to say that sounds low with construction.
It is low. There is, well, because we're able to purchase off of a time and material bid that has already been bidded out through BOCES, that cooperative bidding process we already belong to. So we are able to do them actually at a lower cost than if we were to bid this out privately, going through that whole process. So being we already belong to the cooperative bidding with BOCES, and we'll also be utilizing that for some of the projects on the capital bond. We're already talking about how we're going to do the gym floors, and we're going to use that time and material bid to do those gym floors in order to get it at a lower cost,
You always
to
have an
save
answer,
money.
Carrie.
So we do our homework, you know, we reach out and we find out the answers from all of these individuals, and again, that was a recommendation from BOCES and conversations I had on how they built their vestibules, and then Park East brought it to our attention again, saying, you know what, let's just use the vendor that's on that bid because they've been successfully able to do it in other districts. So we have avenues to use in order to keep the costs down. However, those numbers are not yet fully loaded. We do anticipate adding more money onto that. Those are the rough estimates we were able to get at this point in time in the 1 week's time that we had to kind of get that information together. So I think more so the question is where is the board comfortable? You know, are we not comfortable going to 4.21%? Are we comfortable with 3% or 3.5%? Do we want to add the school psychologist into the budget at another $100,000 onto the expenditures? You know, I think that's more of where we're looking to get guidance tonight so that in April we can bring a final expenditure budget to you, and we could then take, okay, we now have another $120,000 or $200,000 allocated for security enhancements in the future year. And again, it's money that's allocated to that, and should we not find that we're using it because we're able to tighten the controls we already have in place, then it becomes fund balance in future years. To add to that, the next slide, which I have been asked to revisit from our last meeting, this is just a 4-year projection. It's hard to read, I'm sorry for that, there's just a lot of information on here. We project out, and we're changing our projections on a monthly basis. So this projection in future years is showing what happens if we do 2.5% levy, the proposed budget with a 2.5% levy increase, and what happens in the future years. We start deficit spending, we start depleting our reserves again, and start heading down that path because, again, you're leaving money on the table. So it's something that has to be understood, is that once you take that out, you never get it back. Your levy limit is not what, in the future years, is based on the actual amount that you levied, not what your prior year's limit was. So this now shows what we were look at if we were at 4.2%, the maximum levy limit requiring simple majority vote. And you can see we maintain stability. We maintain a small surplus. It's not significant, but it is a small surplus. And our reserves don't deplete as quick. We are using the reserves, and we do start seeing decreases in them, but we're not going as fast as if we were only at the 2.5%. So this is just, an additional reiteration of what it looks like if we leave money on the table, as they say. So I hope that helps. All the business officials say.
It's a lot of they. So to make it clear, what we're asking the board to do tonight is to please give some very careful consideration and thought to where you feel the community might be receptive. That number should be, for your thinking, somewhere between 2.5 and 4.21%. And when we meet again, we're going to ask to survey the board at what number you want the budget to be finalized at.
Go ahead.
Sorry, get through your voice.
This chart does not show the 96 grand for...
This 4% chart shows the additional 600,000 expenditure reaching that 4% levy. So if we were to add that 600,000, this is the 4.2% levy limit, and it also increases the expenditure side, which is why you see the deficit.
Oh, I'm on the wrong slide.
The 2.5% one does not include the $100,000 school psychologist.
Correct. So we're working in a deficit as of next year without even putting the 96 grand. So we're going to really be about $180,000 deficit.
Potentially.
If you stay at 2.5.
If you stay at 2.5 and add in the psychologist. The psychologist is a non-negotiable for me, but that's just me. I really would implore everybody to make sure that happens, especially in this climate.
Do we have a second?
I'm just saying, I'm putting it out there. Could we, I'm like hesitant to say this, but could we poll the community by way of like Survey Monkey or something to see, because the security costs are driving up where we were. I just would like to hear what the community says, and I'm not sure that there's enough people in this room or enough emails that we're receiving or dialogue to really know. You won't get the whole community, but
I think that, each year we go to the levy maximum, which is not even that high compared to some previous years. I remember like 7 at one point being floated. We've had less than 1, correct? We don't know, we could have less than 1 in 2 years from now. And we may look back and say we left, almost $700,000 on the table, which isn't huge when you're talking about a school budget. But how would we feel that we left security money out for the difference of $700,000? And another thing happens and we can't do our vestibules, or we are able to participate in a personal district SRO program and they want us to pay for a share and we're unable to do that. I think the community doesn't need to just say, what are you comfortable paying? We also need to be asking, what are we comfortable losing or leaving or going without? Nobody likes to pay more. But when you break down what my tax bill will be with the difference of a school district of $700,000, it may not be that much if I'm getting vestibules and the possibility of a district SRO. So I think we have to really think about what a 4% is for 1 year, rather than just it's higher than it was last year. We're still under the tax levy limit at 4%. We may never have an opportunity like that again. So I think we all have to have a realistic consideration of it rather than just, oh, we're used to a 2 number. I don't know, just think, we really have to think about it.
When we did the bond, we put up the calculator, the individual calculator, the tax calculator, and I'm wondering if you just brought up a good point, if maybe that is something that we could put out again.
We do it every year with the budget.
We're doing it for all the different
You've typed in any number and it will
You can
spit
tell
out.
I let Tommy know that part.
Yeah, it'll spit out the number at any levy.
I feel it responsible to caution the board about surveying the community regarding a levy comfort level. I think the law of negative response applies, and you are more than likely to hear from people who want to keep it artificially low than you are people that would support a higher number. And I think the board may get the wrong sense of the community by survey, I'm sorry to say. What I think is important to know is that once the board decides on the number that you are comfortable with, that you believe reflects the community, we will make it abundantly clear to those who will be casting a vote that again, the levy limit is below the cap, and what we are able to do with the funds that will become available to enhance security. And I think if we do that effectively, and the sooner we know that number, the more effectively we can do it, I think the community will support the budget.
Any other comments? I mean, I'm going to, again, reiterate the fact that picking a number and then saying we're gonna have security and use that, that money for security is really hard for the public to wrap their hands around that. I would much rather us say, we're going to put in another guidance counselor with this money, which we already are in that too. We're going to put another school psychologist for crisis intervention and positive behavior program. And we're going to definitely get the vestibule at Harley, since that's the one that you walk into, where there's no space between the greeter and that front door. I mean, if we can say these are the three safety things that we're getting with that money, I think that would be easier for people to say, that's at 3.7. And then we're going to look at, what the state is going to give us, how we can use our smart bond money, and say to the public, these are the areas. We're looking at mental health of our students, and we're really looking at the littlest people in our community who are at a little bit of a disadvantage, if that's what covert, if they would agree to that. I think that might be, and then we could pick a number like whatever that would cost, because just to say security.
Well, Mrs. Freed, I think that what I have learned from communities is they don't care what the source of the funding is, they just want to know what we're doing with it.
That's fine.
So I think that and I think we can intelligently say to the community, based upon this dialogue, that we will move forward in adding a guidance counselor, a school psychologist, and security vestibules to all school facilities.
But that puts you at what percentage then?
We can finance at least one and possibly two within the operating budget at a percentage that approaches 4. But the rest will be funded through the Smart Schools Initiative. And the reason why I make the point that I do is the community doesn't care if we're getting the money through a grant-funded program through the state or as it's part of the budget. If we can intelligently say that this budget allocation allows us to do vestibules in each of our buildings, I think that is what the community would like to hear. I'm concerned that if we say that at this number we can do Harley, we're skipping a large population of parents that don't have vested.
But is it honest to say that we can do all 4 buildings with less than 4%?
Yes, when we say that we are doing, when we're using a combination of both the budget allocation and the Smart Schools Initiative.
Okay.
I'm not sure the community cares where the money's coming from as long as we have the money.
Okay,
And that the representation is honest with what we're saying.
Right.
Would be used, which it would be.
It would be a combination of those two things.
Right, and we have to make it very clear that some could happen earlier than others, as Carrie articulated tonight. Those that are within the operating budget happen faster than those that are allocated through Smart Schools. We're hoping to see change in legislation to make that not the case, but today that is the case.
So can we find out where that levy
Yes.
number would be putting in the Smart Schools money, the psychologist, the guidance counselor, although that guidance counselor is in the 2. So the psychologists and the vestibules, including the smart bond money, we'd fall somewhere below 4.
We can have that ready for you for the April meeting, so that we can finish this conversation and bring it to closure, and the board can then, I think, lock in as to what plan we want to do going forward. We'll break down what is the general fund budget. We'll include the school psychologist in that, as we're already at the 2.5%. And then we'll break it down by expenditure to levy to smart schools. Make sense?
Yeah, the sooner we can get that information, I think the better, so that we can mull that over, because we have to vote on that budget that night. We have to, so, need a little.
I'm not sure we don't have all the information we need now. It's just a matter of outlining.
I have the information.
Yeah.
You just gotta figure it out. Got it.
Yeah, we just have to articulate it clearly for you. You could likely have a memo next week that will clear that.
Adopt the budget, that's for budget adoption.
Do you want to post this tonight, or do you want?
If I'm hearing the board correctly, what you would charge us to do is to include the school psychologist, the guidance counselor has already been included, and to articulate what the Harley vestibule would be, and perhaps the next most affordable building to do, which is likely the one you're in, for adding security vestibules, and then count on doing the other two buildings using the smart schools, and then to figure out what the tax levy increase is at that number, with the guidance counselor, the psychologist, and 2 buildings of vestibules, one of them being Harley Avenue.
Yeah, I don't think so.
We got it.
Continuing with capital projects. Capital reserve referendum is another conversation we've been having since January. Dr. Bossert and I have been having this conversation for over a year now of something we'd like to get put into place is establish what's called the capital reserve. And what this would be is utilizing savings at the end of each year, when you have realized savings on the budget, is take that money and potentially fund a capital reserve for future projects. And these future projects would be things that were left off of the capital bond. If you recall, the BCR, Building Condition Survey Report, was about $60 million. We passed a $34 million. So there's still a lot of work to be done within the buildings. And we think this is a way that we can start tackling some of those items. So the question came up is what does that reserve referendum look like? And I know this is so tiny to read, and I apologize, but it's a lot of information. This is the resolution the board would pass in order for the community to vote. And what it is called is the Facilities Improvement Program 2018. That is what the capital reserve would be labeled. And it allows for various things. So that second paragraph is giving us the leeway to do numerous improvements within the district. It is funding a reserve over 10 years, a maximum dollar amount of $5 million, maximum of $500,000 every year to fund that. So should the board accept this, and should the voters accept it, at the end of each school year, if we have additional savings on the expenditure side or see additional revenues come through, we could then at the end of the year, because the voters approved it, fund a capital reserve up to $500,000 each year. If we don't have the money that year, we don't fund that reserve. But we have 10 years of time to do that, the maximum amount to be $5 million. Once the board, we feel we have money in there and we have a project that is on this list, and you'll see that list is very vague and general to allow us some flexibility with things that we need to get done. And we feel we have money in there, we have a project that needs to be done. The voters would actually have to vote again in order for us to use the reserve. So it's a process that we would have to go through, and you have to go through state education, you have to go through building permits and all of that. But what we're looking to do right now is establish the reserve. Get it on the books and have it in place so that in future years, as things start breaking down that are already on that building condition survey report that we already know of, we can kind of try to get ahead of it before we start seeing catastrophic things such as major roof leaks. So the list here, like I said, it's very comprehensive. It touches upon most things that are in the Building Condition Survey Report, and gives us that broad definition so that we can kind of have some flexibility with where we want to go with that. One thing I do need to know, I don't know if it's on, we need a decision actually this evening as to whether or not the board wants to move forward with building a capital reserve called Facilities Improvement Program 2018. And the reason for that is the legal notice has to go out tomorrow because it has to be posted in the papers next week, and that resolution has to go in the legal notice. So Mary Lou is waiting for information from me anxiously. So I need to know if the board is in support of that resolution, and we'll formally vote on that in April when we adopt the budget and get that ballot set. But we just need to know if the board is in favor of moving forward with that at this time.
There's no minimum that you have to put in.
No minimum, the maximum is.
It's just a maximum, so if you don't have extra funds, you don't put them in. So what's the downside?
There is none.
There's none. So does anybody disagree with this? Nope. We're all in favor. Hit the button.
Thank you. So our next steps, as we mentioned, we will give a follow-up.
Did you want to say something, Dr. Batson?
No, there's one other conversation.
But that's in a discussion item, that's why I skipped it. The next step is we will provide you with the updated information that you requested this evening. Our board meeting, April 12th, is when we are set to adopt the budget. The budget has to be adopted no later than April 23rd, should we find some hiccups or snow issues or anything on April 12th. But hopefully we are able to get to that date without issue and have a budget adopted on April 12th so that Mary Lou and I can start our process preparing for the vote. So our final budget will be proposed on April 12th. All expenditures are finalized, all revenues will be finalized at that point in time. So I'm looking for questions, which I think that we may have answered most, but just to lead into quick what Dr. Bossert was just alluding to, and it's on the discussion items on the agenda, the budget vote location and time. That's the other thing that has to go into the legal notice. We have always run the vote from 2 to 10 in the middle school. Cafeteria. For the bond, we did it in the district office from 6 to 9. And it was successful. We currently have it in the budget notice as a 6 to 9. Excuse you.
Sorry.
We have it in district office 6 to 9 for the annual budget vote, but we wanted to poll the board if that is what you wanted to continue to do.
Yeah, we need complete clarity here. When we made the decision to shift to 6 to 9 for the bond issue, we did it with the intent that that would be the budget time moving forward, and we got a lot of positive response to that. The only real question on the table for the board tonight is the location. The recommendation of the administration is to keep it where we did the bond vote for the budget vote as a pilot. We do have some concerns that if we have a very large turnout, there might be specific periods during the day where lines get long and it'll be tight. But we do want to assess our ability to maintain it in the district office hallway as to not disrupt any of the educational process or flow within the middle school. But we wanted to absolutely positively, the board was on board with keeping it in place in Deal hallway for this year and then assess future years based upon our results.
Can I have numbers in terms of the bond vote versus a normal budget vote?
Yeah, I think we were about, Mary Lou, I know you looked at this, correct me if I'm wrong, about 800 short of a typical budget vote when we had the bond vote.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, they don't all come at the same time. You have between 6 and 9.
When did you have the greatest majority of people? Did you? I think I was there in the morning, and I saw that there was a good number of people. Did you see that you got?
Mary Lou feels the heaviest portion of the traffic was after 5 p.m.
It was after 5 p.m. So really, the location in the cafeteria is probably.
But
I do understand you're having it open all day if you're changing the hours.
Here's my huckaboo. We are at battle. I made that word up.
I know that usually.
Bugaboo. We are having a ongoing battle with the Board of Elections. Much like every public school district, we are trying to be able to dictate to the Board of Elections when we do and do not want them in schools. There are high-powered legislators that are helping us to sponsor bills to make it district choice whether or not we host elections. And we all feel that it makes a lot of sense to relocate general elections and other special elections like the one we'll be hosting in April to other places within the community like churches and libraries and places that don't contain thousands of children. While we have all these security measures in place on every other day of the year, it is very difficult to use those same protocols on days of election. So I think it is counterintuitive with what we are trying to accomplish with the Board of Elections by holding our own election in a place that we are telling the Board of Elections we don't want voters.
Okay, I agree with that. But is there another location? Because I do think that from what I saw when I was there, it does get tight. I can't say that there was more than 25 people in that area. It was very tight, and having gone through budget votes every year, that you do see waves of population, and people tend to bring I think when it was in the district office for the bond, it was a quick run in and run out. I think with the budget vote, you get more people. There's campaigns going on. There's just more population, and I just feel maybe there's another location.
Plan B, if you're asking.
Yes, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Is to use half of the middle school cafeteria.
Okay.
To restrict flow to just that portion of the building. Would be very similar to what's been done in the past, but we would allow for half of the room to be used so we can continue to serve student lunches and use the facility. But again, you're giving voters, without the protocols we typically have, access to the building. We would, of course, enhance our security for the day. We would have people inside and outside. We would have marked spaces, and I think we could do it and maintain the safety of our students. It, however, is not as out of the way and restrictive as holding in a district office.
I have one question. Did we have the same number of voting booths for the bond as we did for a normal budget election?
Sure. Yep.
I think that I do not want voters coming in around students now that we've changed the hours. I don't like that, so I would keep it in district office. I think we're talking about safety and security nonstop, and then we're bringing in, mostly community members and parents, but.
One thing that we should keep in mind is that the district office is not a separate district office. It's part of the middle school. There's a door that goes right into the hallway, right there. So in terms of a door into a hallway, there's a door into a hallway from the cafeteria that takes a lot longer to get to than a door from that district office right into the middle school hallway. So it's not like we have another building that we're doing this in and it's completely separate. If we're going to try to get a vote passed that's above 2% and people walk up to a long line, I don't know about that. If it was in a separate place, I might consider, that's really mixed with students. They're mixed with students in district office. Not as much, but if we can really close off that cafeteria to only keep them in that portion and have some security standing where they can interact with students, I really am nervous about going over 2% and then walking up to a line.
I will say handicapped people love the district office location because they were able to park and walk right in, rather than with the cafeteria. All I heard was complaints about how far away and there was not enough handicap parking.
We can make either happen. We want the board to feel very comfortable and confident with our plan. I understand Mrs. Freed's concern. If our intent is to go out with a larger number, that we may have a larger turnout than we might otherwise anticipate. I am making visual contact with Dr. Sapienza, who is giving me confirmation that we can make it work using half of the cafeteria and make sure the students are properly secured. So if that is the will of the board, all we need to do is change the public notice. The district's budget newsletter has not yet been printed, and we will make sure the location is clearly articulated in all of our literature.
So which half of the cafeteria would be the front half?
The closer half to the parking lot, and we would use the divider, the wall divider, to separate completely, along with a significant amount of security guards. We would also barricade a walkway to keep the students that are potentially out on the playground completely separate from the voters. So we would have security guards to make sure no one's entering the building from the cafeteria. We would have security at the door of the entrance, which we've always done. We would also have security outside monitoring the flow of traffic to make sure that everyone stays, and the children stay where they should be and the voters stay where they should be.
Also I'm thinking, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute. I'm also thinking if we're having campaign tents and people are milling about, pulling about, then maybe it's silly for me to make a big deal about district office, because we'll still have the same number of people flowing around on campus, really. So maybe that's silly to make a big security deal about it.
I'm sorry, is there any way to do something creative that day for lunch such that you really, I'm a little nervous about the accordion because again, like Julie said, whether it's a door, that accordion is even more flimsy than the other. Is there any way to maybe pull lunch into the gym
We're
for
gonna
that
have a lot
day?
of, we'll
Or
have an
in
11 minutes of
classrooms,
security.
you know, you have some of those back classrooms?
Well, I think that the bigger decision is, I mean, we can play around with how that gets done and we keep students safe. But the bigger decision that we have to make tonight, I mean, Heather, you had an idea?
I don't know. I don't know if it's inconvenient or a huge project. Can we move it to another school? Because to me, Boyd Gymnasium is like off the beaten path. It has its own entrance.
No parking.
I would say parking there is a concern, and I would agree with Mrs. Freed's point that this is not the year to make that type of change if we are expecting to go out at a larger number than our voters have grown accustomed to.
Okay, so I think the time is 6 o'clock in the morning to 9 is a good, did you have people come at the door at 9 o'clock and say, hey, I thought it was 10?
No, we had 6 a.m. though.
Okay, so I think the earlier time, I've always heard a lot of complaints from people that they go work into the city and there's no way that they can make it home. So I've heard a lot of those complaints.
I will say, after listening to a lot of the community after the bond vote, they were very frustrated that it was in district office. They didn't like that it was changed. They didn't, kind of a good segment of the community isn't engaged in the operations of the school. So to come, although we send numerous newsletters and pamphlets, people are just accustomed to going to the middle school cafeteria for how many years they've been doing it.
Change is always hard.
Change is very hard, but I think pushing the 2% and then.
Full transparency, we did have a large number of voters go to the cafeteria before arriving at district office, and they weren't thrilled about it.
So if we're looking, I mean, personally, I'm in support of putting it back to the middle school. I think we could, I trust that you guys would do enough job, as we've done in years past. We've had multiple budgets and cycles, we've never had an issue, and I think now would be even more sensitive and have more controls.
Yeah, I think we can try it this year and
I'm
see
good
how
with
it
that.
goes.
Okay, so
I think we have your consensus.
direction?
I
And
think
we
you
will
have our
make,
consensus.
we will make, the consensus is to keep it in the middle school
Yeah.
cafeteria, and we will.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
And maybe offer picnic day lunch. Dr. Barca buys pizza for all the middle school kids.
Okay.
Your treat. Your treat, the whole school.
Okay. So the only thing that will change is the public notification that we just had to amend to include the capital reserve being created, so that's not an issue. And we have not sent our budget newsletter to print yet, so that's not an issue. So we'll have many opportunities to articulate where the location will be, not a problem.
Any other budget questions? Good?
Yeah, thank you so much, Barry, as always. Okay, we're finished with discussion items. Let's go to recognition and acceptance of donations, but I'm going to hand it to Mrs. Mamalito. She's just going to describe the donations, and then we'll take a motion and vote on them right thereafter. Mrs. Mamalito?
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to give a special thanks to the EEE, who is graciously donating $46,333.78. Amazing job. We thank you for your continued efforts, to the children and the staff and the community of the Elwood School District. Unfortunately, we had to postpone their presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing about all the wonderful grants that are being awarded this year at our April 12th meeting, correct? We would also like to thank SEPTA for their generous donation of $4,411.56, which are supporting STEAM Night, Winter and Spring Boyd Sports Club, Winter and Spring Boyd Friendship Club, and Winter and Spring Harley Friendship Club. Again, without the generosity of our volunteers and our community members who help donate to these organizations, these things could not be possible.
And I believe is there a fundraising effort, EEE coming up?
Yeah.
What day is that? Just to say publicly.
It's in May.
It's in May, yeah. It's on the calendar.
What's the first weekend in May? I don't have my calendar.
We'll get to you on that before the end of the meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the donation, May 11th, Friday? Motion by Mrs. Marcus, second by Mrs. Mamalito, all in favor, 5-0. And thank you again to our community organizations. So we're up to consent. Oh, we have to accept them separately. Can I have a motion to accept the donation from the Elwood Education Endowment? Mrs. Weiss, second by Mrs. Mamalito, all in favor. Debbie, 5-0. And then a motion, please, to accept the donation from SEPTA. Mrs. Marcus, Mr. Tomio, all in favor, 5-0. Okay, consent agenda, which will include financial matters and action items. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Mrs. Mamalito, second by Mr. Tomio. Questions, comments about any of that chunk? All in favor? 5-0. The next item is regarding policy, first readings of any policies.
Can I just make one comment? I'm sorry.
You may.
I always inform individuals who are on the personnel agenda for appointment that while they do not need to attend, they could watch live streaming from home, and I would point out the point in the agenda where they were officially approved by the board. So that was the point you were officially approved by the board, so welcome to the Elwood School District.
Oh, okay. Okay. When we did the consent agenda vote, that included the policy vote. Are there any specific questions or comments regarding the policies? Thank goodness. We're fine. Okay. Any items not listed on the agenda, Dr. Bossert, or board members? Thank goodness for that too. Any, now we're up to our second resident remarks. Agapi, it's all you. Do you have any?
You had a question before.
Okay, resident remarks are limited to items voted on or discussed at the business meeting. Persons wishing to speak should identify themselves and any organization they represent. Comments should be kept as brief as possible, not exceed 3 minutes. And you know what is not acceptable to say. So, any resident remarks?
I don't know. It was actually
Specifically about the curriculum. With the middle school curriculum change, I was just curious about what the state or federal requirements for the earth science lab is, because I did notice that there is less lab instruction time now for earth science with the new, so it's fine, it complies.
It's the same.
We haven't changed it.
That was my question. It was kind of like, it just like hit me as we were talking about it. Like, what? So everything is in compliance, I'm assuming. And again, I love it, but we don't have to vote, you don't have to vote on it, we can just do it.
It's it.
It's in.
I'm thrilled. Thank you, Dr. Sapienza.
Yeah, we just have to pass the budget for it to be in, Mrs. Bell. So work on that. Okay, can I have a motion to re-enter executive session to discuss personnel matters? Mrs. Weiss, second by Mrs. Mamalito, all in favor? 5-0.
Yay.
Just the board, correct.